one of you guys wants to be a general?
A general?
Be a what?
Binkley?
The Dirty Dozen, a legendary war film, but what if I told you most of what you think you know is wrong? From actors nearly dying on set, to explosions gone wrong, and one actor battling addiction, here are 20 mind-blowing facts you never knew about The Dirty Dozen. And make sure to watch till the end, because we will be revealing the band-ending scene no one was supposed to know about. The Dirty Dozen was inspired by a real unit, but not like you think.
So Frank is planning to kill us? He must be going 120.
Most people assume The Dirty Dozen is based on a real team of violent criminals sent on a suicide mission, but the truth is completely different, and honestly, way more interesting. The movie was loosely inspired by a World War II group called the Filthy 13, a squad of elite paratroopers famous for their rebellious behavior, their pranks, and their refusal to follow basic military rules. They weren't killers or convicts at all. Their filthy nickname came from refusing to bathe, saving water for cooking, and living rough in the field, not from any crimes. Hollywood took their wild spirit and turned it into something darker and more dramatic for the big screen. In fact, only a small portion of the movie is actually based on their real story, and that's where things get really interesting. Want to hear it? Only about 30% of the movie is actually true. Here's the surprising truth: most of what you see in The Dirty Dozen never happened. Jack Agnew, one of the real members of the Filthy 13, said the film only reflects about 30% of what the unit was really like. The filmmakers kept the rebellious attitude and the rough, chaotic style of the real soldiers, but almost everything else was changed. The criminal backgrounds, the death row angle, and the suicide mission were all Hollywood additions meant to make the story more intense. So even though the movie feels gritty and real, most of it was designed purely for entertainment. And if you think that's surprising, wait until you hear what comes next. The production built a massive chateau just for the movie. When it came to filming the big final mission, the production team didn't want to settle for a small set or a clever camera trick. Instead, they went all in and built a full-scale chateau from the ground up, and this thing was massive. The structure stretched about 240 feet across, stood 50 feet tall, and was surrounded by thousands of trees, bushes, ferns, and shrubs that were brought in just to make the landscape look like the French countryside. This fully designed environment took a huge amount of time, money, and manpower to create. At the time, it ranked as one of the biggest sets MGM had ever built. The scale of it made the final battle feel grand and chaotic, and it's one of the reasons the ending of The Dirty Dozen still holds up today. But here's the twist: while building it was impressive, blowing it up turned into a whole new challenge that the crew didn't expect. Blowing up the chateau was almost impossible. After spending all that time and money building the giant chateau, the crew ran into a problem no one expected. The set was built too well. It was so solid and reinforced that the special effects team realized they couldn't destroy it the way the script required. To blow it up convincingly, they calculated they would need around 70 tons of explosives, which was far too dangerous and completely unrealistic for a movie production. The set simply wouldn't collapse the way they wanted. It was basically a fortress. So instead of risking a real demolition, the crew came up with a workaround. They rebuilt key sections of the chateau using lightweight materials like cork and plastic, designed specifically to break apart on camera. That way, they could film the big explosion safely while still making it look like the entire structure was being obliterated. Lee Marvin's alcohol addiction nearly derailed filming. Behind the tough, commanding performance of Major Reisman was an actor who sometimes showed up to set in rough shape. Lee Marvin was known for drinking heavily during production, and it caused more than a few headaches for the cast and crew. There were days where Marvin wandered off set and ended up at a nearby pub instead of reporting for his scenes. On one occasion, the crew had to physically go find him, bring him back, and pour coffee into him just to get him steady enough to deliver his lines. Even then, he wasn't always fully present, which slowed down shooting and frustrated everyone around him. His co-stars enjoyed working with him, but several of them admitted that his drinking made some scenes unpredictable. Jim Brown once said that working with Marvin was a mix of brilliance and chaos, depending on what kind of day he was having. Despite all this, Marvin still managed to deliver a strong performance, but the behind-the-scenes tension was impossible to ignore. The doorbell has a hidden meaning. There's a small but intriguing moment in The Dirty Dozen where Major John Reisman and Joseph Ladislaw ring a doorbell. At first glance, it seems like a simple, mundane action, but only the most eagle-eyed fans will notice the hidden significance behind the quick rings. They ring the bell in such a way that it plays as though it's the first 4 notes of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, a composition used by the Allied forces during World War II. This subtle detail adds an extra layer for observant viewers, showing that even small gestures in the film can carry meaningful behind-the-scenes or character-driven messages. It's one of those tiny touches that rewards fans who watch closely. Several cast members were real war veterans.
Posey.
Me?
Yeah, step out here.
I'd rather not, sir.
You might be surprised to learn that many of the actors in The Dirty Dozen weren't just playing soldiers, they had actually fought in World War II. Lee Marvin served in the US Marine Corps, Charles Bronson was in the Army Air Forces, George Kennedy and Telly Savalas served in the Army, and Ernest Borgnine was in the Navy. Their real-life experience added a layer of authenticity to the film, from how they carried themselves to how they handled weapons and stunts. Their backgrounds helped make the action and combat scenes feel grounded and believable, something you can really notice when watching the movie closely. And speaking of casting, some of the roles were almost played by completely different actors, which could have changed the film entirely. John Wayne was almost cast for a major role. Believe it or not, a few of the most iconic roles in The Dirty Dozen were almost played by entirely different actors. John Wayne was offered the role of Major Reisman, but turned it down because he didn't like the original script's subplot involving an affair. Meanwhile, Jack Palance was offered the part of Maggot, but refused because he didn't agree with the character's over-the-top personality. If these casting changes had happened, the film might have felt completely different, and some of the on-screen chemistry we love today might never have existed. Why Trini Lopez left the production early.
If you reach to plug one, as sure.
One of the dozen, Trini Lopez didn't finish the movie as planned. Lopez, who played the character Jimenez, left the production early. According to some sources, his music career was a factor. Frank Sinatra, who had signed Lopez to his record label, encouraged him to focus on music rather than the long, demanding shoot. His departure meant the filmmakers had to adjust a few scenes, and some of his lines were reassigned or cut. Despite leaving early, his presence in the film still adds a lot of charm and energy to the ensemble. Lee Marvin hated the film. While he delivered a powerful performance as Major Reisman, Marvin later admitted he felt The Dirty Dozen was just another Hollywood moneymaker, more entertainment than war story. He said the film had little to do with the real experiences of soldiers in combat. Years later, he was happy to star in The Big Red One, a war film he believed captured the reality, exhaustion, and moral conflict of battle far more truthfully. For Marvin, The Dirty Dozen was exciting fiction. The Big Red One was personal truth. From The Dirty Dozen to MASH, Donald Sutherland played Vernon L. Pinkley in The Dirty Dozen, but that role did more than just showcase his acting chops. It directly led to him being cast in the 1970 movie classic MASH. Producers of MASH were impressed by Sutherland's performance as the clever, rebellious, and slightly unpredictable Pinkley. They felt he perfectly captured the mix of humor and irreverence needed for the iconic role of Hawkeye Pierce. In other words, his work in The Dirty Dozen didn't just earn him acclaim, it opened the door to one of the most memorable roles of his career. It's a fascinating reminder of how a single role can shape an actor's trajectory, connecting one legendary film to another in Hollywood history. It was one of the first films to show American war crimes. At a time when Hollywood war movies mostly portrayed American soldiers as flawless heroes, The Dirty Dozen did something bold. It showed US troops committing violent, morally questionable acts, including actions that could be considered war crimes, like the deliberate killing of unarmed enemy officers and civilians during the Chateau attack. In the 1960s, this was groundbreaking and controversial. Most war films before this, especially those made after World War II, focused on bravery, sacrifice, and patriotism. But The Dirty Dozen flipped that image, showing American soldiers who were criminals, unstable, even brutal. Some characters acted out of anger, revenge, or personal chaos, not duty or honor. This shift reflected changing attitudes in America during the Vietnam War era, when people were starting to question authority, military decisions, and the morality of war. By showing American soldiers as flawed and capable of both heroism and horror, the film helped usher in a more realistic, more uncomfortable, and more human kind of war movie. It wasn't just entertainment, it was a turning point. Jim Brown retired from the NFL while filming.
Thank you, Mr. Major, sir. I really do thank you for that.
While working on The Dirty Dozen, Jim Brown made the bold decision to retire from the NFL at the peak of his football career. Brown had been one of the league's most dominant players, but he wanted to focus on acting, and the role of Robert Jefferson in the film gave him the perfect opportunity to transition into Hollywood. Leaving professional sports for a movie role was a huge risk, but Brown's performance proved he could hold his own on screen. His athleticism, charisma, and intensity brought a unique energy to the Dirty Dozen ensemble, showing that his talent extended far beyond the football field. The cast were much older than the characters they played. Hollywood has a long history of casting actors older than the roles they play, and The Dirty Dozen was no exception. Many of the convicts on screen were significantly older than the soldiers they were portraying. While the real dozen were somewhere in their 20s, the cast was already in their 40s, yet their performances were convincing enough that most audiences never noticed. This casting choice added a certain gravitas and presence to the characters, proving that experience sometimes outweighs age when bringing complex, rebellious roles to life. This scene was partly improvised.
They're very pretty, Colonel. Very pretty. But can they fight?
Yes, sir.
I hope you're right.
Director Robert Aldrich insisted on strictly following Nunnally Johnson's script and left little room for improvisation, except for this one scene with Donald Sutherland. The famous scene where his character, Pinkley, is asked to impersonate a general wasn't originally meant for him. Actor Clint Walker refused to do it, so director Robert Aldrich turned to Sutherland at the last minute. With almost no rehearsal, Sutherland added his own deadpan delivery and subtle comedic touches, small improvisations that made the scene unforgettable. The movie changed how violence was rated in cinema. The Dirty Dozen didn't just shock audiences with its story, it redefined the limits of on-screen violence. The infamous scene where prisoners dropped grenades into a shelter full of German officers and their companions caused widespread outrage. Critics, audiences, and even industry leaders were stunned by the graphic intensity. The controversy caught the attention of MPAA President Jack Valenti, who cited the film as a key reason for introducing a new movie rating system. This replaced the outdated Hays Code and set the standard for how films would be evaluated for violent content in the future. In many ways, The Dirty Dozen didn't just entertain, it changed Hollywood's approach to cinematic violence forever. Bad weather led to production going $1 million over budget. The Dirty Dozen was filmed in the United Kingdom during the summer of 1966, but the weather wasn't on the production's side. Heavy rains kept delaying shoots, sometimes for weeks at a time, throwing the schedule into chaos. By the time filming wrapped, the combination of delays and extensive reshoots had pushed the studio $1 million over its original budget, a massive sum in 1966. The experience proved just how unpredictable outdoor shoots can be, even for a big Hollywood production. 4 of the actors reunited over 30 years later. It's rare enough for 2 actors to work together again decades after a film, but 4 of the Dirty Dozen cast members reunited more than 30 years later in an unexpected way. In 1998, Ernest Borgnine, Clint Walker, George Kennedy, and Jim Brown lent their voices to the animated film Small Soldiers, directed by Joe Dante. The project was far from a war movie. It was a family-friendly animated action comedy, but it gave fans a unique connection to the legendary 1967 film. Seeing these actors together again, even in voice roles, was a reminder of the chemistry and legacy that made The Dirty Dozen such a cultural touchstone. A later recognition. Decades after its release, The Dirty Dozen received official recognition for its enduring impact. In 2001, the American Film Institute ranked it number 65 on its 100 Years, 100 Thrills list, highlighting the film as one of the most exciting and adrenaline-filled movies in American cinema history. This acknowledgement cemented the movie's legacy, showing that its combination of action, suspense, and rebellious characters continues to captivate audiences long after its original 1967 debut, the band ending nobody saw. Most viewers don't realize that the ending we see in theaters wasn't Robert Aldrich's original vision. The director secretly filmed a much darker conclusion in which none of the Dirty Dozen survived their mission. Every convict, along with Major Reisman, dies, followed by a somber military ceremony honoring them posthumously. MGM executives discovered the alternate cut and demanded a safer, more conventional ending to avoid alienating audiences. Aldrich later admitted that his version captured the true futility and sacrifice of war, a theme he felt was lost in the final release. This hidden ending remains one of the film's most intriguing, what could have been moments in Hollywood history. Which one of these were new to you? Share it in the comments below, and don't forget to like the video.